Welcome, everyone, to another powerful episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I have to tell you that I am so super excited with my guest today. I cannot wait to introduce you to her. But before I do, let me remind you what we do on this show. This is really our space to have those courageous, connected conversations. You know it gets meaty, you know it gets real, and we're going to go there whenever we can. And so this is all about how you're choosing to show up as a leader, because leadership really is how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve, and how you choose to take that personal responsibility. And this is our space to have those conversations that matter. And so with that, before I give you the formal introduction, let me welcome not only one of my dear friends and just one of the most fabulous people I know on the planet. Let me say hello and welcome Charmaine Hammond.
Thank you. I am so excited because every time we have a conversation, it's always so rich. So looking forward to it.
It is. And I will tell you that she is beyond a powerhouse. Let me give you just a little bit about what Charmaine's got going on. Charmaine Hammond has been in the business of changing lives. And I assure you, she changes a lot of lives for more than 25 years. This former correctional officer, yep, you heard me right. She used to work in jail. She is a serious badass. I am not even kidding. And corporate dispute resolution expert, now travels the world teaching the principles of communication, sponsorship, and collaboration. As a best-selling author of 5 books and featured in 6 others, and a professional speaker, she has had tremendous success in finding corporate sponsors to fund her printing, graphic design, venues, travel, media, technology, hotels, and even her pet food and dog poop bags. Love that. And oh, you got to get to know her dog, Toby. Just saying.
Yeah.
She has developed sponsorship relationships with more than 40 sponsors and 60 business partners. Her recent speaking and book tour, Million Acts of Kindness, involved a 14,000 kilometer tour across North America in a 32-foot sponsored motorhome, hotels sponsored for the team, and more than 40 businesses. And the best part about it is she did all of that with her dog, Toby. You know, I love that. I love that she built her business and her dog is so present. You know, that speaks to my heart. Yeah. And it really created this movement, A Million Acts of Kindness. Her company is called Raise a Dream. And I could go on for days talking about why I love this woman so much. But again, Charmaine, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
So talk a little bit about, you've really been in a space to, when we talk about leadership and we talk about creating these global movements and these really big, influential, impactful spaces, you have really been someone who has shown up powerfully in that space, both with the Million Acts of Kindness and now with what you're doing with Raise a Dream. Talk about how you stepped into this space to really do a lot of this work around movements and make such a global impact at the level that you're playing.
I think it all began sort of this concept of leadership and movement for me. After when I worked in the correctional system, I worked my way up to working in a leadership capacity, running a young offenders center. So similar to a group home, a treatment facility. And I started to love what happened when the team that I was leading was completely aligned, and where we could bring in other community partners to support these youth in getting through the tough times and basically rehabilitating their lives. And so I think that's where collaboration really started to hit me. When I worked in the jail system, that was not how we did business. And when I left the correctional system, I ran a crisis facility for moms and their kids. It was a family violence center. And that's where I started really finding the richness in collaboration, in leadership, and creating movements, because part of our role at the center was to reduce the stigma of mental health and also to help keep women and their children safe and their families. And then we created a men's program. And the reason I bring that up is because that concept of what the organization had always done and served for many years before me was always women and children. And we found that there was a need to bring men into our programs and help them equally as much. So this movement started to happen. And I loved watching what occurred when you bring people together who are inspired for one specific outcome and magic happens. It really does.
Yeah, and what I love about that, there's so much about that, and I think you're so right. The magic shows up when, especially, you have that singular focus in terms of what's the outcome you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But what I also love is that you expanded that to really invite the men in. I get a lot of people that challenge sometimes that say, "Why don't you just work with women? You've got this powerful message." And I'm like, because there's, especially with the corporate background and all, I find that there's so many men that need that space as well,
Yeah.
and wanting to create a way that they can emotionally connect into something that feels bigger, feels more impactful for them. I just think that's so beautiful that you've really had a space where you can open that up. What I want to do is I want to step back for just a little bit, because one of the things we do on the show is we make sure that we spend a little time defining some of the words that we put out at times.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's like the bingo buzzword kind of things. And you've said a couple times the word collaboration. And I really want to know, when you talk about collaboration, what does that really mean? I think, you know, to really take a moment to define that in a way as we're, you know, choosing to have a different way to show up as leaders today. What is that collaboration? What does that really look like? And what does that mean when you're putting it in your context?
Yeah, that's a juicy question. I would say for me, collaboration means bringing together people and organizations or groups. So sometimes the collaboration involves an entity, which of course is formed of people, but it's bringing a individual or a group together with others who can support a common goal or purpose or a mission or movement, but what they bring to the table can be very different. So one of the things I've done for years, well, I opened my first business in 1997. So since then, I've been facilitating collaborative processes, so community initiatives, facilitating negotiations with multi-stakeholder groups like in government. And one of the things I love is that when people come together, even though their agendas are different, which often creates the problem, the collaboration means that people are coming together with their agenda, their underlying interest, but the whole focus is on some kind of solution that benefits them or the people that they work with or serve.
Yeah. And I love that, because I know, as you being, and I would love to tap into this just a little bit, because we've had conversations on the show, and I know we have in bigger spaces, but the idea, and you are a former conflict resolution, and that's still work you do in corporate, is to really help from that communication. And what I always find so interesting, and I did my 20 years in corporate as well, and one of the biggest opportunities is I still see too much of when people talk about managing that conflict, and you talk about bringing different agendas to the table, that oftentimes they're trying to get the conflict out of the equation.
Yes.
Instead of inviting and facilitating healthy conflict, which in my opinion, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. In my opinion, we can't be communicating without healthy conflict in the equation, because we always have different experiences and agendas we're bringing to the table. So I'd love to hear, especially from someone who is such an expert in this space, what does that mean when we talk about conflict resolution and inviting that conflict to the table to have a juicier, richer communication? And what does it do when we dare to maybe have some vulnerability and step into that space?
Oh, that's a powerful question, because it brings up so many elements of conflict, Candy. And one of the things that I personally appreciate about what conflict does for us as people is it allows us to see situations from other perspectives. And part of the challenge when people or groups come together to collaborate on some kind of a project, they've all got their agendas and interests. And there's a perception sometimes that what I believe or what you believe is the belief. So we come there thinking that, you know, the problem that we see is the problem that everyone else sees, or the solution we see is the solution that would just make sense for everybody else. And so that's one of the first problems we actually have to tackle. And most people perceive conflict as negative, something that should be avoided, something that is awful. So they actually approach those conversations from that mindset. You know, they walk into a really tough conversation thinking, this is going to suck. You know, last time I talked to her, she went off the rails. And so they create, I mean, you and I have talked a lot about mindset. They create that experience. And the beauty of managing conflict effectively and respectfully is that when you get to hear everybody's diverse viewpoints, even if they're different from your own, the solutions start to emerge, and you start to see there is so much common interest. Even how you might do things could be very different, there's a lot of common interest around the table, but people don't take the time to usually explore that with one another.
Yeah. Which is, and I love that because we're actually demonstrating that right now in this conversation, right? And I've done that even in 3 days where I'm like, this is why we're coming to a common agreement around if collaboration means X. And if we're talking about, okay, so let's talk about this conflict, it is saying, Charmaine, share your perspective around, here's my thought and how I see this. How is that the same or different for you? Where, to your point, we're letting go of those assumptions, right? I think the biggest opportunity or the miss is that people come to the table already thinking, well, last time she blew her lid on whatever, she's just going to show up and resist this again, instead of saying, maybe I come at it from a different perspective and open up a bigger conversation. Because I think most times where it's negative is people don't feel like they were seen, heard, valued, respected, loved. And if you can open up that space to bring that compassion and to say, I just want to listen, it changes it, right? And I think we get to demonstrate that even in conversations where we know and love each other and trust each other, there's still a difference of opinion we bring to the table.
Yep. You know, one of the stories I love sharing about what you've just tapped into, Candy, is years ago, I worked on one of my most favorite projects. It was a number of community businesses and organizations and the police that came together, and they hired me to be the facilitator and consultant on this project. It was a business revitalization zone project, and they came together because the downtown businesses wanted to revitalize and beautify the downtown core. So I thought, well, this shall be great. But on meeting number one, it was so positional, and business owners were angry at the municipal government, and they were angry at people in the community for not respecting the space. And so what happened is I needed to bring this group of business owners, community agencies, concerned citizens, the police together to figure out how they could all work together to make the downtown core a better place to be. As I started to go around the table and just hear perspectives, there's no attachment to perspectives, or we're not looking for right or wrong. I started to hear a common theme. Every single person in their own way said, our downtown needs to feel safer. So when I was able to say to the group, wow, you've got so many different perspectives, but the one thing I keep hearing is the importance of safety and beauty and making downtown a place where people want to come and shop, they all went, yes.
I just got chills with that, right? Those revelations.
And that we can solve, right? So then, we can talk about what would a downtown that's safe and a pleasure to be in, what would that look like? What would it feel like?
Right.
What would need to happen? So what happened? It happened so quickly, Candy, because the police identified that part of the problem in downtown is lots of businesses had no lighting in the back. So bad things happen where there's no lighting or under trees where people can be hidden. So when the police just said, what about if some of the businesses were to put lights in their back entranceway and clear the bushes so there's no places for people to hide and do naughty things. That made a huge difference already. And then 7-Eleven started playing, the 7-Eleven convenience store and gas station started playing opera music.
Oh, nice.
And it discouraged people from hanging around the front door. So they did little things that started to make movements to safety and beauty and welcoming and stopping some of the problems. But it was done in a way where people felt respected and they were coming from a place of common interest and need.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you originally said, right? It's that singular focus around an outcome. Because what happens oftentimes is people are trying to boil the ocean and do everything. And so they get sideways and they're like, yeah, but we need to do this and do this. And what they don't realize is there's an opportunity to come to something to say, we need to start here. We can always enhance and always add and always put these other things, but to be able to hear that and listen to that. And I think, as leaders, that's oftentimes a missed opportunity for people because there is so much posturing or politics or things that are going on. And so I want to shift a little bit because you've taken this background that you've had. You've come from, the kind of the criminal justice system. You've come from these spaces of some very heavy conflict and resolution. And not only did you create this movement around A Million Acts of Kindness, which I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that was. I just think it's such a beautiful movement that you put together, and then moving into what you're doing now with this Raise a Dream initiative and movement, wanting people to see how you can take, because I think sometimes people get caught up too in, well, my background's this is what I'm trained on, this is what and not seeing how you might be able to open up new possibilities that may not seem connected at first, but actually have a really deep thread that make them really rich and juicy, to use your words, which I love. So talk a little bit about how you take that move into first the Million Acts of Kindness.
So the Million Acts of Kindness that you mentioned earlier with my dog, Toby, I've got several books that I've written about my dog, Toby, and
He's awesome, by the way.
And my dog, Toby, I mean, we all have leaders in our life. Mine happened to be a dog that taught me my best lessons about showing up. You mentioned showing up and how you show up in the world earlier. So he taught me to show up in a way that was coming from a place of being more present with people and not being a perfectionist. And so he taught me all these beautiful life lessons. But the one thing that he taught me that just impacted me so profoundly was, he was a naughty dog when we adopted him and had a lot of behavioral issues. Cost us a lot of money, destroyed houses. And in our mission to keep this dog in our family and not be dealing with all of these challenges, we got a behaviorist to come in. And she determined that this dog was a dog who needed a job and a purpose. And he became a therapy assisted dog. So he and I volunteered every Wednesday in a hospital. And the lessons I learned, Candy, about leadership and communication and being present, all the things we need to do as leaders in our own business, in our life, in our community. So I watched this transformation happen between this dog and the patients in the hospital. And then that's where the Million Acts of Kindness tour was created. I was watching unconditional kindness and what it did in the environment he was in. When he showed up, things changed. I mean, I could walk into a unit and you could feel the tension. You could feel the dissension sometimes between people that worked in the hospital. Toby showed up and all of that went away. And so I thought, wow, we can't always have a dog with us. How do we create this in our life and our business? So Million Acts of Kindness tour was really this big 6-week North American tour to teach workplaces and schools about respect in the workplace, respect in the community, and kindness in schools. And it was a phenomenal experience. And you talked about that thread. When I remember being on the tour, we had a sponsored motorhome, and I'm sitting in this motorhome and we're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, how did I get here? What the heck? I started off working in jail and I've had my business 20 years and I'm in a motorhome with my dog and husband trying to change the world through kindness. How did this happen? And that thread that you talked about for me was always about kindness.
Yeah.
So it just took 21 years to figure out how to blend it all together.
I get you. And I mean, first of all, I want to say that I think we all should have a dog around us all the time. Yeah. I agree. My best role model leader has been my dog. And, taking the example from you, Peyton's actually going through the journey to be a therapy dog and do those things, right? And what's interesting is I have my headphones on for those of you that can't see us right now that are listening on iTunes. And what's interesting is Peyton must have known you were talking about this. He sat so attentively and was watching me as you were describing Toby. It was like very weird because I'm like, my eyes, I started to actually get very emotional because I was watching him react to me listening to you talk about the Million Acts of Kindness, because they know. I just feel like they are so empathic, and they are so, they really do teach us so much about how to show up differently and authentically and more presently. And the fact that you use that as a catalyst to really launch a lot of what you're doing now. I mean, A Million Acts of Kindness really set the stage for a lot of the things that you're doing now. So talk about how that just amazing, beautiful, incredible opportunity where you find yourself going, how did I end up here? How has that transitioned and morphed into this work around sponsorship and Raise a Dream and what you're doing now? It's just so beautiful watching this journey.
I'm just laughing because as you were talking about Peyton, Toby's come in to join me. How do they know? Oh my gosh, animals are
They do know. They're just so, oh my God, that's so incredible.
He's got his little Be Kind collar on. So how, one of the things that sort of took me from that to Raise a Dream, and Raise a Dream I own with an incredible business partner, Rebecca Kirstein. It was our business coach, and he was working with us both separately. And he started to learn more about what Rebecca was doing and what my mission was in the world and what I was going to do now after Million Acts of Kindness, and how could I keep this movement going, but without having to be on the road doing tours all the time and teaching people what I love. And so my coach said, you've got to meet Rebecca. And we got together on a phone call, which he facilitated the introduction and the call. And then I think we just forgot that he was on.
I can see that because I know both of you. And yes, I can see that happening.
Yeah. And so, it was just really magical to have that first conversation with Rebecca. And what we discovered is both of us were so excited and committed to the concept that people we meet every day not only in the entrepreneur world, in the nonprofit world, and in communities, everyday people. So many people have a dream they want to raise, whether it's, feeding kids in their own community, or writing a book, or, starting an after school club, or just a movement that is making people happy. One lady that inspires me so much, she's retired, and she said she worked her whole career to, fix problems in the workplace. And now all she wants to do is make people smile. So she's constantly doing these smile projects and hug projects, and she just wants to feel goodness in the world. And so that's what we aim to do, is to help people raise their dreams. And raising dreams, you've raised lots of your own dreams, Candy. You know this better than anyone, that you can't do it alone as much as we want to think we can. Rebecca and I always say it takes a team to raise a dream. And so that's what we do, is we teach people how to build partnerships, how to bring in collaborators, how to find champions, and how to fund it through different forms of sponsorship.
Yeah, and I love taglines all the time. I like sound bites, but that probably has to be one of my favorite taglines, is it takes a team to raise a dream. And it's interesting because I was hoping we'd find a way to come back to this, and I think it's the perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about the power of community, because you've talked, even when we were talking about collaboration and we were talking about these other things, and when we talk about team and we talk about community, how do people start to step in that space? Because I think for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, we have this misconception or misperception around, I've got to do it alone, and it's tough and it's hard, and I don't know how to ask for help, or I don't know how to engage people. And sometimes when I hear the word team, I think I've got to be able to pay for them, not realizing there's people that are willing to show up for us, that it's not about the money, it's about the cause, it's about the dream. And so what does that look like? How do you help people open up that access to create that team? What does that really mean? And how does community play into that?
Yeah, brilliant question. I see so often, and I am guilty of this. This was the first 10 years of my entrepreneurial life. I tried to do everything alone, and, didn't want to let people know if I was struggling or needed support. And it's really lonely, and dreams don't get raised that way, right? And we've probably all gone through that.
Guilty.
So when I started learning to invite people in, and it was actually a friend of mine who said, Charmaine, and this is a dear friend who I used to do coffee with all the time. And she said, what are you working on? And I can't remember the big project I was working on. And she said, how have we known each other this long? And I don't know that you're working on this project that's this important to you. How is that possible? And I said, well, it's my work. And she said, no, this is about who you are. This project is about who you are, and I want to help you. And so she so brilliantly helped me identify that the people closest to us want to help us. But if we don't let them know what matters to us and the projects we're working on, how do they even know how to show up for us and be involved? So first thing we got to do is share our dreams and share the projects with people, so our community, our friends, our family can come to support us. They want to be a part of it. But if we don't share what we're doing and what we need, they don't know how to help.
Mm-hmm. And that's so powerful. And I know being a guilty in both those spaces, one, thinking that, I'm the extreme type A that's like, oh, I can do this myself. I got it. And really hitting rock bottom a few times through this process. And I mean, even in the last 5 years, the understanding of knowing when to raise the white flag and say, it's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's actually more empowering and a greater space of strength and vulnerability to say, I don't want to do it alone, nor can I do it alone. Yeah. And I think the other space that's really so powerful, and I found myself getting very emotional as I heard you say it, because even now I'm thinking, man, there's some people that don't know the big dream, right? Yeah. And when you think about who are you sharing that dream with? Are you out there allowing people to show up for you? Because I think as leaders, we forget sometimes it's not about us always driving the train. It's about letting others get on board and help steer the ship a little bit, and allow them to lead and allow them to serve. And you know, you're so right, because I think about sometimes where there's that conversation where when you do share things with friends, it's only when things are going really well and the successes have been made. It's not the grassroots, and it's not when you're getting stuck, and it's not when it gets icky. And I had my best friend at one point said to me, she goes, wow, how come you get to choose how I get to be your best friend? And I remember it being a sucker, because I had a conversation where I said, I felt like I wanted to crawl in the fetal position because it got really big and scary. And she goes, then how come my phone didn't ring last week? And I'm like, because you're married, you got 3 kids, one's my goddaughter, blah. And she goes, so you get to decide how I get to be your best friend. And I was like, whoa. And she doesn't remember the conversation. And I say, oh, I use it all the time, right? And it's one of those where she said, how do you feel when people reach out and share their dream and share their fears and they need to lean on you? How do you feel? And I was like, I feel awesome. I feel like, right? And she said, then how come you don't let anyone do that for you? And what you're saying, that resonates so much, right? Because we forget that we actually take away other people's joy in being able to show up for us. And I think you saying that, because I'm feeling myself even feeling it right now, where it's like, okay, where am I not stepping up? And it's almost like I'm asking to challenge myself in this moment to go, if I'm having a reaction to it, there's probably some people I'm not sharing this with, where how selfish of me. I mean, it kind of comes back to that, doesn't it? Because you're not letting people have permission to say yes or no.
Yeah,
and I love so beautiful in what you just said.
I had goosebumps waving over my body when you said that. I mean, I love that your friend had the courage to share that with you, Candy, because so many people would have perhaps thought, oh, well, she doesn't need my help, or, oh, I'd love to help her, but she's not letting me in, or, and those things will actually impact the relationship in a really subtle way. And so her courage and love for you to raise that question. I mean, what a beautiful example of what happens when we let people help us. Wow.
Right. And you acknowledging that demonstrates why it's important to pick the right community and the right people, because we have too many people that are out there that all the people in their life are yes people, and they shut down and they're afraid of the conflict we were talking about, instead of having that courage to call people out on their bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Because I know you were, exactly. It's one of the reasons we're friends, right? Because we play in groups that say, look, we're going to hold each other accountable. And I hear you saying this, Charmaine, and
it's not quite how it's showing up.
Right. Exactly. And so we get to be truth tellers, because I think so many people lack that in their life, to have those people that aren't always going to say yes. They're going to be people that are going to challenge you. They love you through it. They'll support you. And so how has that changed for you? How have you looked at your own community, your own inner circle, to say, I need more people that push me? Have you had to do that in your life?
Totally. And, one of the things when Rebecca and I built Raise a Dream, we purposefully hired Stacy, our online business manager, because her skills and strengths were not Rebecca and I. Rebecca and I knew that we did not need another us.
Right.
We knew someone who actually enjoyed systems and processes, and who could keep the big picture as the focus, because Rebecca and I are creators. So we get excited about something and we want to move on to that. And Stacy is so skilled at saying, that's a great idea. And where does it fit into the big priorities now? And I wonder if we might put it over here so we don't lose it, because we don't want to lose that idea. But, we hire people and bring people into our team that complement, make up for the skills and assets that we don't have. That's one thing. But the other thing is, we also go out and purposefully seek input from people who might not agree with what it is we're working on. So when I did the Million Acts of Kindness tour, I talked to people that might not think it was a good idea. And the ideas that came from that, because I'm also wanting to get ideas, because when I'm out there on tour, I'm going to meet people that think this is a silly idea, or you can't change the world through kindness. I'm going to meet resistors. It's just part of life. We don't all share the same purpose and vision. And so those conversations really helped me understand the other viewpoints that I needed to understand so I could make my tour more encompassing and engage people in different ways.
Yeah, and I can hear some people, because I want to just interject for a second.
Yeah.
I actually can feel some resistance showing up from some people that are listening right now. I know it's happening, because they're like, okay, that's great, Charmaine, that's you. And that's really scary. I'm not going to purposely put myself out there for people that I know are either going to be haters or going to resist. How do you help people? And for you, you're a seasoned pro at that now. I would imagine that initially that was a pretty scary space.
It was really scary.
So how do you overcome that? Because I know there's people right now that are doing the back pedal going, that's way too uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
How do you step through that? Because we've been there. We know it is scary.
Yeah, exactly. You know, part of it comes back to almost the training I did and the work I did as a mediator, is that everybody's perspectives are welcome. And it doesn't mean that their perspective or beliefs has to guide what I do.
Right.
But I can be really curious about understanding their perspective better, because sometimes people put resistance out or the objections out, and it's because they lack the information or it's not been their experience. So part of what I do is come from a place of curiosity. One of the things that was a big eye opener for me is, you know, my background is not in the pet industry. I've never had a pet business. You know, I've done some volunteer work for pet organizations, but I've never really been in the industry. When we did the Million Acts of Kindness Tour, we did events and supported numerous charities. And so I was very much in the pet industry. And I learned that it's a really interesting and opinionated industry, that there are so many viewpoints of what type of food or what type of routines for your dog or what's okay, what's not okay. And I kept finding myself in these conversations every day that, you know, that we're dealing with really strong viewpoints. So I had to learn how to handle those, but also how to respectfully get out of a dialogue if it wasn't useful to what we were doing. Yeah. But part of what happened is really inviting curiosity. And it was amazing that when you're curious and have no attachment to the outcome, which is really tough to do, but when you're just coming from a place of curiosity, sometimes what people say is not what they mean, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I think that's more the case than not too often.
Yeah.
And I love, and you just played into like this big juicy question I want to ask you right now, which is stepping into that place of curiosity. I think so much we get locked up in the what if, and it's all this fear-based, what if the sky falls? What if I can't do this? What if this happens? Instead of dancing in that space of curiosity where we let go of the attachment to the outcome, which is someone who is a recovering control freak.
Mm-hmm. Me
not
too.
the easiest thing to do. It is absolutely the most uncomfortable space and most liberating space. Mm-hmm. And a space that I continue to learn more every day, because there's still times I want to rein it in and control the heck out of it, right? But as we change that, so changing that space that can be so anchoring and that what if and getting into that space to really dance in kind of that delicious curiosity. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about your big imagine if. I mean, you've been playing in some like big imagine the possibilities, big imagine if. And as you're really Raise the Dream is like taking off like wildfire and you got all these things that are moving, what's the big imagine if for you that like scares you a little bit and like excites you even more? And you're like, yeah, this is kind of the next big swing of where this is going.
Yeah. You know, our big imagine if is we want to be in some way helping a million dreams get raised. And what big if is, and I get goosebumps when I say that, because I've had people say, oh, isn't that a little large? And I said, well, I don't want to start off with like 200 dreams. It's because it's got to keep me moving. What that has done, Candy, is that when Rebecca and I got super clear on what jazzes us, we know that when people raise their dreams, regardless of whether their dream could be to have a happy, healthy family. It doesn't mean they're doing tours and stuff. So when people raise their dream, instantly something in the world changes. The world becomes better. And I really believe that's why I did Million Acts of Kindness Tour, that every act of kindness might actually take over the acts of unkindness that are happening in the world. So we've got this big juicy mission. And one of the things it's done, and I know you've seen this in your own life, when you get really clear on how you want to show up in the world and the impact that you want to be a part of making, is that you become really aware of things that you weren't aware of. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I'm speaking at an event, and I had 2 teenage boys in the audience. These are grade 11 students. One of them actually had to leave just after my presentation to go write a math class. So good for him. But they came. I was speaking on collaboration and sponsorship. This grade 11 student had me almost falling on the floor, so moved by what he's done. At grade 11, he has opened up a nonprofit organization, and he is feeding young people, some of them in his school, that don't have enough food to carry them through the weekend. So he's generated $75,000 worth of sponsorship. He's going to grocery stores, and it's called, let me get the business card while I talk about it. What they're doing is they are actually filling knapsacks or backpacks,
Oh, I love that,
full of food, and it's called Weekend Fuel Bag. And and Brady and his team are grade 11 students.
Oh, that just
and
melts my heart.
they saw a problem and wanted to solve it. And then minutes later, another student, different project, grade 11, came up, and he's helping people who are homeless. Grade 11.
Wow,
so
talk about emerging leaders. Oh,
incredible.
God, that melts my heart.
And I think when you get clear on kind of the dreams and the impacts and how you want to show up in the world, all of a sudden you start noticing things that people are doing right in front of you that you could somehow support or be a champion for. So I can't wait to connect these 2 young people, the people that I know that can support their dream. And I think that's what happens when we really set that big lofty goal, is that it starts to be synergistic. We're not just working on what matters to us anymore. We're helping people with what matters to them.
Yeah. And for all of you listening, can you see why I adore and love this woman so much? I mean, her heart is just wide open. And the fact that she just took time talking about this, to talk about someone else's dream and focus, and how much that lights her up. I mean, Charmaine, I love the work you're doing so much. And I know that there are people right now that are like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to raise my dream. I'm ready to step into that space. And they're like, how do I get started? So if they wanted to reach out to you, if they want to find out more about the work that you're doing, what's the best way they can contact you? They can support the mission, the movement, they can get involved, they can raise their own dream. How do they find you?
So the website is raiseadream.com, raiseadream.com, and our Facebook page is Raise a Dream. And those are the 2 best ways to stay in communication. I really encourage people to follow the Facebook page, because you will be hearing the dreams that people are raising. I mean, I just love going on there, especially on Wednesdays, because that's the day that everybody shares what they're working on or projects they've heard of. Yeah. And so I think we're really creating a community, a dream raising community. And those are the 2 best places to come and hang out with Rebecca and I and all the dream raisers.
Yeah, and I highly encourage you to go check out the things that they have going on. It's amazing, the work that Charmaine and Rebecca are creating. It's amazing to see the dreams and to see the activity. And I couldn't agree with Charmaine more, that says one little shift, one little change has an incredible ripple effect. So if you think that just by creating a dream in your own backyard or your own home or doesn't have an impact, you are sadly mistaken. It has a huge ripple effect for the energy we're putting out there and how other things open up. And so we all get that opportunity to step forward and serve in whatever capacity speaks to us and show up, right? And so Charmaine, as we need to have you back. I love you. And we're closing things out. I'm wondering if you have any, as we're bringing this whole conversation kind of full circle, what would you like to leave this audience with, or a last thought or aha or some beautiful piece of insight?
One of the quotes I love is by Oscar Wilde, and he talks about the importance of showing up in the world as you, because everyone else is already taken. And I think one of the biggest gifts that we can do, or how we can be as leaders, is to show up as you, with who you are, with our imperfections, with our biggest joys, because that's what makes the world a better place, is when we have people showing up exactly who they are.
I love that. And it falls in line with a quote I love from Wayne Dyer that says, you can never fail at being yourself. And I just think about everything we talk about on this show, everything we talk about with these amazing powerhouse leaders like Charmaine and others who are here sharing their stories, sharing their gifts, sharing their insights. It all starts with you learning how to say yes to yourself. And so when you get clear about this is who I am, flaws in everything, that's what makes you so fantastic and beautiful. It's all the quirks and, you know, and so Charmaine, I love how you're showing up in this world. I love how you graced us today, honored us with your presence, your knowledge, your insight, and just your beautiful, amazing heart. Thank you for being a guest on the show today. So grateful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Candy. And I love what you do to bring communities together around leadership. So through your podcast, thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. It is an honor. We can't do this without you. And so glad that you choose to show up with us, and hope that you will take the nuggets that really kind of landed for you so that you can start to say yes to yourself on a much bigger level, raise your dream, and get out there and truly live the life that you're inspired to live. This is your opportunity to know that leadership is all about how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take personal responsibility inside those spaces. This is Candy. I love you. Thank you as always for joining us. And we will catch up with you next time with another powerhouse interview here on the Powerhouse Podcast. Mwah.